19-year-old Faith Hedgepeth was just as pure a spirit as one can expect to find in such a grim, dark world, and a member of the Native American Sapani tribe. Ever since she was a young girl, she had wanted to work with children to help the most vulnerable members of her society grow into happy, healthy, responsible people who could help make the world a better place. Faith knew that there were two career paths that she could take in order to make that a reality, being a pediatrician or a teacher. So she enrolled herself at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and was in the third year of her undergraduate studies in the year 2012. During the spring of that year, Faith took a break from her academic studies and took up residence in an off-campus apartment near the borders between Orange and Durham counties. Her roommates in this particular apartment complex were a girl by the name of Karina Rosario, who Faith had been very close friends with since the middle of her freshman year, and Karina's boyfriend, Eric Takoy Jones. Karina and Eric's relationship was a tumultuous one at best, one that had deep running history of tension, violence, and abuse. In the end, Karina had to move out in order to escape the relationship, with Eric also moving out shortly afterward. However, it seems that Eric was violent and paranoid and attempted to break into the apartment twice after Karina had changed the locks, apparently having convinced himself that the whole thing was a ploy and that Karina had moved back in. But even though this was not the case and Karina had not moved back in, she and Faith continued to spend a great deal of time together, as one might expect from two close friends who had been through so much together. Faith had even driven Karina down to the county courthouse in order to get a restraining order against Eric, who was apparently enraged by the positive influence she had in his ex's life, and had threatened to harm her because of this on more than one occasion. Months later, during September of 2012, when Faith was living back on the college's campus, she attended a sorority rush at Alpha Pi Omega, a traditionally Native American sorority. Given that she had a paper to busy herself with that night, she departed the event just after 7 p.m., heading over to David Library with Karina and making sure to text her dad to let him know her whereabouts. The pair then left the library at around 11:30 that night, heading back to their campus apartment together before walking down to a dance club in downtown Chapel Hill called The Thrill. Security footage from the dance club shows the girls leaving at around 2 in the morning, with a neighbor of the girls reporting that she heard noises coming from their apartments at around 3, leading us to believe that they did in fact make it home safe. But what happened after that is very, very unclear. Records show that someone logged into Faith's Facebook at around 3 a.m., with a text being sent from her phone to her former boyfriend around 40 minutes later. "Hey B, can you come over here please? Rosario needs you more, please let her know you care." The ex-boyfriend, a boy named Brandon, read the message just after 4 a.m. and replied questioning who sent the message. Karina's phone records show that Karina was trying to call Brandon at around the same time, and when he failed to answer, she attempted to call another boy named Jordan, who arrived at the apartment at around 4:30 in the morning to drive Karina to a friend's place where she stayed overnight. The following morning, Karina returned to the apartment with a friend, expecting to find Faith home alone but in good health. Yet when she walked through the door, the apartment was deathly quiet. She called out to Faith but received no reply, assuming her roommate had gone off to lectures or to the library. But Karina had a bad feeling in her gut. She hadn't heard from Faith all morning, and so just to be certain, she slid open her roommate's bedroom door and peered inside. What she saw next would haunt her for the rest of her life. Karina found Faith's dead body, partially naked and wrapped in a quilt. Neighbors would report hearing an ear-splitting scream around that time before 911 police dispatchers received an urgent call to attend the address in question. When the police arrived to investigate the scene, they found a large amount of blood splatter in the bedroom where Faith's body was located, along with an empty bottle of rum that also had a significant amount of blood on it, indicating that it was the murder weapon. Aside from the blunt force trauma to her head, Faith had all manners of cuts and bruises to other areas of her body, as well as dried blood under her fingernails. These were deemed to be defensive wounds from when she tried and failed to fight off her attacker. horrifyingly, there was evidence of indecent assault, with a sizable amount of male DNA being found at the scene. After a distraught Karina was interviewed by police in the immediate aftermath of the body's discovery, her abusive ex-boyfriend Eric was considered the #1 suspect in Faith's murder. Police seized his cell phone, finding texts that he had sent to a friend that very same evening that seemed to ask for forgiveness for what he was about to do. He also tweeted out a similar sentiment to his followers, implying he was about to do something terrible. The tweet read, "Dear Lord, forgive me for all my sins and the sins I may commit today. Protect me from the girls who don't deserve me and the ones who wish me dead today." It seems the cops had bagged their man, an abuser whose social media status was tantamount to a confession. But shockingly, when Eric's DNA was compared to that which was found at the scene of the crime, it didn't match. Local police also compared the DNA to many of them who were found to be present at the dance club that Faith and Karina had attended that evening, but again, all samples came back as negative matches. A GoFundMe page was set up, crowdfunding a reward for information that peaked at $39,000, but still no usable leads or information was forthcoming. Interestingly, the 911 call made by Karina after she found the body has some under a considerable amount of scrutiny, with some suggesting that the call didn't come from Karina at all, but actually from the friend who accompanied her to the apartment that day, a girl named Marisol. Not only does the voice on the recording not sound like Karina, but the caller never once mentions Faith by name, only ever referring to the victim as my friend. Whoever made the phone call also lied to the dispatcher, telling them that she touched the body to check if Faith was still breathing, but when the body was analyzed for fingerprints, none matching Karina's or Marisol's came back, almost as if they were afraid to implicate themselves in Faith's murder. Police also recovered a handwritten note from the crime scene, one written in black ink on a piece of paper torn from a fast food takeout joint. The handwriting is scrawled and barely legible, so law enforcement aren't entirely sure if the note says, "I'm not stupid, jealous witch," or "I'm not jealous, stupid witch." The sloppy writing could be the result of two things. Either whoever wrote it was drunk, or they had used their non-dominant hand in order to throw off handwriting analysis who might have been able to use it to identify the killer. It was also left at a crime scene where the victim's blood was splattered almost everywhere, yet the note showed no traces of having blood on it, proof that it was written somewhere else before being dropped near her body. The handwritten note has been something that has confused professional and amateur sleuths time and time again, and it has even been suggested that it's a complete red herring, left by the killer to simply confuse those that wish to get to the bottom of Faith's murder. Perhaps the most important piece of evidence we have from this case is taken from a butt dial made from Faith's phone at just past 1 a.m. The recording is around 3 minutes long and details a conversation made between Faith, another girl, and another guy. Audio experts were hired to enhance the audio. They claim that it clearly records Faith crying for help. It also records a male voice saying, "I think she's dying," while a female voice is saying, "Do it anyhow." An intense discussion that seems to commence, which ends in the unknown female becoming enraged. The unknown male and the unknown female can also apparently be heard using the names Eric and Rosie, and if that is true, there is no doubt that this is Karina Rosario and her abusive ex-boyfriend Eric. Faith's father is convinced that the recording is of his daughter's death, yet the model of phone that she had used at the time of her death is incapable of time-stamping phone calls accurately, meaning that the recording could have been made at any point during the night. 4 years later, in an effort to definitively identify a suspect, local police released a phenotype of the killer, constructed using the sample of DNA left at the scene. The profile shows that the murderer is of mixed Native American and European ancestry, specifically a mix of Mexican, Colombian, and Iberian heritage, with small amounts of other South American and African ancestry. It is very likely that he would have been considered Latino and would have olive or tan skin, black hair, and few freckles. Despite the original pool of suspects numbering in the thousands, police have managed to whittle it down to just 10 potentially guilty parties. As has been previously stated, the obvious suspect, Eric Tacoy Jones, was not a DNA match, but local law enforcement confirmed that the murderer was almost definitely someone that Faith knew, even if he wasn't someone particularly close, a mutual friend or a classmate, for example. It also remains unclear if it was the work of a lone killer or if such a person had an accomplice. Karina Rosario, on the other hand, remains one of the most interesting and intriguing figures in this case. What would possess her to text or call two people so late in the night with such urgency? Why would she leave one of her best friends in the world, one that had been so good to her throughout her rocky relationship, all alone in an apartment that had been the target of repeated break-ins by a psycho ex-boyfriend? And what was going on with that bizarre 911 call she did or perhaps didn't make? As of 2019, Chapel Hill police were still in contact with her, despite the fact that she's attempted to escape the situation by moving out of North Carolina. According to them, Karina is still cooperative and answers all their queries to the best of her abilities. Yet, in the words of local reporter Tom Gasparelli, it's true that the cops still believe that there's more Rosario can tell them, and it sounds to me like Karina has long been in their crosshairs as a key figure who knows much, much more than she says she does. This happened a few years ago, but I still think about it to this day. I was on holiday in a city on the other side of the country celebrating my 21st birthday with my best friend. We were having an amazing night out with a few too many drinks and ended up meeting two guys, Andrew and Billy. They seemed like really cool guys and we were into them, so when they asked us back to their hotel room, we said yes. Obviously a silly idea, but we were young and drunk. Things were great on the way back to the hotel room. We were all laughing and having a great time. When we got to the hotel room, there were two other men there as well, Ricky and JD, who were at least 10 to 15 years older than us. They gave us creepy vibes, but we brushed it off. We asked Andrew and Billy who these guys were, and they said that they were colleagues as they were in the city for work and the company paid for their rooms. So Andrew and Billy were in different rooms, but we were all partying in Andrew's room that he shared with Ricky. I got a little too drunk and my friend put me to bed. She said that she was going to Billy's room and asked if I would be okay with Andrew, and I said yes. Keep in mind, my friend didn't have a phone either, so we basically had no way of getting in contact with each other. Another stupid thing, I know. So I'd been in the bed for a while with Andrew just talking and chilling when he says, "I just have to pop out, I'll be right back." I assumed he meant just out to the bathroom, not out of the actual hotel room, but he left the hotel room to get something from Billy's hotel room. Anyway, I was just watching TV in bed when the bedroom door opens and I assumed it was Andrew, but my heart sank when it was Ricky, the weird colleague. He walked into the room and sat on the bed. Keep in mind, I'm very naked at this point, trying to cover myself with a blanket. He said, "You do realize that everyone has left you alone in here, right? It's just you all alone. No one is here, and no one can hear you." And continued edging closer and closer to me on the bed. At this point, I was completely speechless and absolutely terrified. I was completely frozen in fear and I had no idea what to do. I tried to say something, but nothing came out. He definitely sensed my fear and for some reason, he just got up and left. A sense of relief flooded me and I felt silly for overreacting. That was until I heard JD, the other random colleague, shouting, "Get the F back in here, what are you doing? This isn't what we discussed. Get back in there and do what you were meant to do. Who cares what that girl thinks? Just get back in there and do what you need to do." I ran to the bathroom and locked myself in because I was so scared, but there was no way out and the only way out of the hotel room was through the front door, and I had to walk past Ricky and JD to get there. I was just so terrified I had a million thoughts rushing through my head, and I had no idea what to do, but I knew that I had to escape. I decided my only option was just to leave the room and be ready to defend myself if things were to go pear-shaped. I threw my clothes on and grabbed my shoes. I opened the door and Ricky and JD were sitting on a couch close to the bedroom door. JD said, "Hey, sexy, where are you going in such a rush? Come on and join us, come here right now." I I said no thanks and ran to the front door and ripped it open. When I got out, I was so relieved, but I was still in a random hotel in a random city with no way to contact my friend, but I thought my best option was to go to the lobby and just wait. As I was walking, I heard two men yelling down the hallway, "Where are you? We know you aren't too far away. Come back and join us. You know you want to." It was Ricky and JD. I was absolutely terrified by this point. I began sprinting to the elevator. I could hear them gaining on me. I never knew I could run so fast, but I just continued and didn't look back. I felt like I was running forever until I reached the end of the corridor and my worst nightmare had come true. I missed the turnoff of the elevator. So I had to turn and run back towards where I could hear Ricky and JD still yelling down the hall. I found the elevator and got in. I could hear their voices getting louder and louder, and I didn't want to imagine what would happen if they got into the elevator with me. The door finally closed after what felt like a lifetime. I thought I would go down to the lobby and just wait there because at least there would be people there, so there would be some form of safety. I got to the lobby and realized that there was no one in sight. No one at all, not even behind the desk. I sat there on the couch and didn't know what to do with myself. I was absolutely terrified that Ricky and JD would come to the lobby. Then I heard the elevator ding and the door open. My heart dropped, but it was Andrew. I told him what had happened, and he was outraged that his colleagues did that, and he took me to where my best friend was. Everything turned out to be fine, but it truly could have been a lot worse. This story happened when I was 15. It's been almost an entire decade now, but I still think about it quite a lot. This was our situation. My brothers and I live with my mom. I'm the oldest of three, and my mom generally leaned on me to get things done. This naturally turned me into an adult from a very early age. Even to this day, my mom talks about feeling guilty for having to thrust adulthood on me so early on. She thinks that I didn't have a childhood, and maybe she's right. As you might imagine, my dad wasn't really in the picture. He was an abusive drunk, and when I say abusive, I mean seriously abusive. Up until the time I was 10, he lived with us, and whenever he would get drunk, he would beat the life out of us. It was always terrifying. The only saving grace was the fact that he wasn't always drunk or had alcohol in the house. In fact, there were sometimes, months at a time, when he would go without drinking, and he was an otherwise pretty decent person. For all that was wrong with my dad, he would have probably been close to an ideal human being if he had not been for his rampant alcoholism and the demon inside of him that came out when he got drunk. The incident that got my mom to finally divorce him was horrendous. I had been in my room playing video games or something, and he was in the living room. My mom just got home from getting the groceries. He accused her of having an affair at the time, and of course, this wasn't true, but he didn't believe it. He kept screaming at her that she was lying. It escalated to the point that he pinned her down on the floor and said that he saw her nose growing, and then grabbed a screwdriver and cut into my mom's nose with it. There's still a scar from that day. Well, that all went down when I was about 10, so this is about 5 years later. My mom was bringing my two younger brothers on some kind of Boy Scout trip. They were both in the Boy Scouts and always felt left out because all the other kids had a dad. My mom's guilt drove her to volunteer and help out whenever she could, so she went with my two brothers for this weekend camping trip with the Boy Scouts. She really wanted me to go with them because she felt uncomfortable having me alone in the house. I insisted that I was mature enough to do it, and honestly, I didn't even have friends that I could party with if I wanted to. She eventually gave in and let me have my way. I remember being in my bedroom, playing with my PlayStation. It was a pretty typical Saturday afternoon, but then I heard a car pull up. I didn't know who it was at first, and I immediately got really panicked that I was going to have to call the cops. My bedroom window doesn't have a really good view at the driveway, so it took me a second, but after studying the part of the car that I could see, I recognized that it was my father's car. I was immediately mortified. I was on bad terms with him, and my mom had a really serious restraining order put on him after they had separated. I got really nervous, and I was not sure what I should even do. He didn't come into the house for a few minutes, and I immediately started wondering what he was up to. I did the only thing that I could think of and cracked my window so I could hear what was going on outside. I thought that if I could hear what he was doing, I would have a better idea. I immediately recognized that he was crying. His whimpering sound was really intense. I hadn't heard from him in years, and my mom said that we would never see him again. But here he was, crying in our driveway. He paced around for a few minutes before finally standing still. I could hear his crying getting louder. Then he screamed. All I heard was a gunshot. The second I heard the gunshot, I immediately knew what had happened. I ran outside. I looked down at my father's lifeless body on the driveway cement. Blood everywhere. As traumatic as it may have been, I didn't cry. I didn't act emotional or anything. I just called the police. They got there a few minutes later and took me into custody. They wanted to keep me safe and secure until they could contact my mom. The rest of the story played out exactly as you would imagine. My mom apologized profusely. I had to answer some questions to the police. Nothing out of the ordinary. I don't really know what to make of the situation. I don't have much sympathy for the guy, and part of me is kind of happy that he did it. But looking back, I just kind of wish that he had done it where I wouldn't have had to have witnessed it. The entire experience made me never want to go stay home by myself ever again. It's been a long time since this whole thing had gone down, and even now, if I have to stay home by myself, I will make an effort to leave the house or to invite a friend over. I won't stay there alone. A couple of years have passed since this entire situation, and I can't help but to think that it was all for the better. My dad was a seriously destructive human being, and I know this might sound terrible, but I just wish that he had done it sooner. For those out there that haven't lived with a toxic and negative parental figure, consider yourself extremely lucky. The tribulations that I had to endure at the hands of my father fostered a lot of rage inside of me.